human rights organizations to advocate for.
Jen.
Can we just start with your remarks?
Can you kick us off? Thank you all for being here, and to the other panelists. And so I'll just, for those who didn't hear, I am from the Center for Reproductive Rights. The Center for Reproductive Rights uses the law to advance reproductive freedom as a fundamental human right that all governments are legally obligated to protect, respect, and fulfill. Human rights and reproductive justice are complementary frameworks, and both aim to ensure that all women can exercise the right to have children, to not have children, to parent one's children, and to control one's birthing options. Sexual and reproductive health and rights, SRHR, are critical to enabling women's economic empowerment, and the two are connected in multiple ways. Not only do violations of SRHR have negative consequences for the economic opportunities for women and girls, but economic factors, particularly poverty, are often key drivers in perpetuating gender inequalities that underlie many SRHR violations and harmful practices. I think some of the other panelists will be going into more sort of talking about reproductive justice and other strategies. I'd like to just maybe take my time to highlight some of the work that the Center for Reproductive Rights has been doing sort of at the intersection of SRHR, economic empowerment, and also the right to education. I'd like to sort of take two examples that really illustrate how SRHR and economic empowerment are linked, and in particular the education of women and girls, and how it's sort of widely recognized as a powerful tool to empower women and girls, and is considered a key pathway to economic opportunity and empowerment. So I'm happy to talk more about the Center's work on these issues during the discussion, but just to sort of begin, looking at the issue of child marriage in particular. Child early and forced marriage persists as a strategy for economic survival, and particularly in areas with significant poverty. Parents often view daughters as a financial burden, as they must bear the cost of raising them, but will not be supported by them in the future. This view of girls as commodities to be bought and sold perpetuates the view that girls lack agency, and that their preferences and best interests do not need to be considered in marriage-related decisions. In South Asia, in our program there, moreover, married girls experience significant pressure to become pregnant soon after marriage. And this pressure results in early, closely spaced, and frequent pregnancies that increase girls' risk of maternal mortality and morbidity. And married girls are often unable to negotiate contraceptive use due to unequal power dynamics and lack of reproductive health information, which results in greater risk of unplanned pregnancies and sexually transmissible infections. Moreover, abortions in South Asia are typically illegal or difficult to access, which exposes girls with unwanted pregnancies either to risks of unsafe abortion or to forced high-risk early pregnancy. Sure, is this better? Yes, sorry. So with each pregnancy and childbirth in turn increases the financial burden on a married girl and her family. In addition, girls married as children are often denied educational opportunities that would allow them to generate income. Child marriage results in a lifetime of economic dependence and poverty. And this financial dependence, coupled with the social stigma concerning divorce and significant legal barriers, means that married girls are often trapped within marriage without a realistic way to leave. Human rights expert bodies have expressed concern about child early and forced marriage, emphasizing its long-term negative consequences on a range of fundamental human rights. In her 2012 thematic report, for example, on servile marriage, the Special Rapporteur on Contemporary Forms of Slavery recognized child marriage as a form of servile marriage and affirmed that all child marriages fall within the slavery-like practices condemned in the Supplementary Convention on Slavery. The Committee on the Rights of the Child has recognized that girls who are married as children are often obligated to leave school and are marginalized from social activities. The CSW Committee has emphasized that child marriage's impact on women's health and ability to pursue education leads to the restriction of women's economic autonomy. The CSW Committee, moreover, has recognized that economic dependence is a critical factor that prevents women from leaving violent relationships. These experts then have urged states to effectively enforce the legal bans on child marriage, to take steps to ensure that girls remain in school, and to ensure that early pregnancy does not interfere with girls' ability to exercise their right to education. These are recommendations that underscore the critical links between SRHR, education, and economic empowerment in addressing and ending child early and forced marriage. Turning now to really quickly touch on a second issue, our policy. research shows that teacher education officials nonetheless believe that they are required by law to administer the student became pregnant as a result of sexual violence. For young girls and adolescents who lack or are denied access to sexual and reproductive health information and services, risk unwanted and unplanned pregnancies. Girls may be able to attend private schools, but the girls who are expelled for being pregnant are in rural and lower socioeconomic areas and are unable to afford schools. Testing and the pregnant girls are forms of gender-based discrimination and direct violations of the right to education. As noted earlier, the realization of this right to education is critical for providing girls with opportunities to lift themselves out of poverty and participate fully in society. And denial of this right creates greater economic and social disparities between men and women and boys and girls. Moreover, when a girl is denied education, she faces a greater risk of being exposed to harmful practices such as child marriage, as well as domestic and sexual abuse. So just to end quickly on pointing to a couple key areas within these issues, these violations that the center is particularly focused on. As I said, we're a legal organization. We focus on the legal and policy frameworks and including access to justice. So, working with advocates on the ground, local partners, and advocating to government officials at the national, regional, and local levels to ensure that legal and policy frameworks ensure access to youth-friendly comprehensive SRH services, education and information, including access to contraception, maternal health care, and safe abortion, which are key strategies to support girls to stay in school and delay pregnancy, and to against the subsequent effects on future earnings and employment prospects as well. And finally, to ensure that the right to education is ensured for married, divorced, and pregnant girls in all of these situations. So I'm happy to talk more about the work in these specific areas, but I want to pass it on to others here as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mira. So I wanted to highlight what Mira brought up regarding the definition of reproductive justice, particularly why it was created in the first place. And so reproductive justice is a human rights framework that was actually started right here, not too far away, probably a building across the street, after the 1994 Human Rights Conference. And it was started by women of color who felt that the mainstream reproductive rights movement of the time were missing very critical nuances, particularly around race and economic justice. And so when they came up with those three tenets, the children, the right to not have children, the right to raise the children you already have in healthy and safe environment, very much so in a direct was very limiting and narrow in its focus, that it left out that there were people who wanted most marginalized when it comes to sexual and reproductive justices. Are going first and kind of framing the context from this legal and systemic lens. We need those and advocacy efforts. And so part of my work is to help people to gain access to the knowledge and education that they need so that they can live fully autonomous lives, so that they are able to make the best decisions for themselves and for their bodies. And I think one of the most important things that reproductive justice does as it relates to women's economic empowerment is it lets them know that they have options and they have choices and that they don't have to be controlled by someone else's idea of what their life is supposed to be. So for example, I used to teach sexual health to young women between the ages of 12 to 24. And one of a few things that came up, and one of the ways that I actually very much so got entrenched in doing trauma work is that many of the young women who came to me with regards to struggling with their sexual identity or struggling with sexual trauma that they had endured blamed themselves or put themselves in very harmful situations because there were no safe places that they could turn to in their lives, and there was no one to give them accurate information about what was happening, or there was no one to be able to just listen in a non-judgmental way so that they could be able to process the things that they were feeling. And for me, that is a key component of sexual empowerment. And often I think people hear the term sexual empowerment and they automatically think the physical act of sex, and that's not it at all. Sexual empowerment refers to agency. It refers to, yes, it could be the physical act of sex, but that I feel comfortable and safe to be able to set boundaries with my partner, that I can have open and honest conversations about body, then in the workplace. Then I can, demand a rate, and I can actually advocate for myself. I am actually a firm believer that if we are able to cultivate as it relates to sexuality, sex, and reproduction, then we can cultivate. And so part of my work really is the channel. I think support how our society can better support women's economic empowerment, both on a legal level, but also like on a grassroots level. There was actually just recent legislation in Texas where there is a bill being introduced to try to make sex education in Texas schools completely abstinence only, just across the board, in every single, not just in schools, but in every single area. While I understand that, yes, not having sex is the only guaranteed way that you're not going to get pregnant or contract an STI, it is simply unrealistic, right? Especially at any age, really. And so I think on a community, on a local level, writing your congresspeople, right? Writing the people who are in positions of power, contacting them, letting them know that abstinence-only education, scientifically proven, does more harm than it does good. And that if you had access to education that was comprehensive and that was intersectional and that actually spoke to the true lived experiences of women and girls, then you would be able to create better opportunities and better access and would be able to cultivate economic power in a more sustainable way. So I'm happy to talk more about that as well, one-on-one after the panel or in your questions, but I will pass it along for now.
Okay, thank you. Our organization advocates for traditional reproductive rights as opposed to reproductive justice in Sudan, especially for women. They don't have the right to negotiate any relationship outside wedlock. That's why we have a lot of problems with abortion. Abortion in Sudan is outlawed. It's not allowed because unless there is some risk for the mother, or for example, it was as a result of rape. Pregnancy was as a result of rape. In this case, they allow abortion up to the first trimester. They don't allow after that for any reason. But if it's facing the life of the mother, in this case, they allow it. If you don't know, Sudan is one of the least countries, the least developed countries, and is in the sub-Saharan region. Already the records of the Secretary General speak about the prevalence of problems like women mortality. The mortality rate in Sudan in 2006 reached 11,000. 11,000 women died as a result of this. Some of the issues are linked to the U.S. sanctions, unilateral sanctions against Sudan, and some others are related to the policies of the government that focus on military, and we have war in Sudan, protracted war in the Darfur region, in southern Kordofan, and this is one of the issues that pose as challenges for development and for human rights. Sudan is implementing ICPD, that's the International Conference on Population and Development, and the Beijing Declaration, and they submit reports on a regular basis. The problems in Sudan are not mainly related to health laws that are not, for example, conducive to women, but to the criminal law that doesn't allow women, for example, to come forward and report issues like rape and these things because they face problems. They can be implicated in crimes that can be punishable with death or with stoning or whatever because it's applying Islamic law. Also, we have the problem of prevalence of female genital mutilation because they differentiate between one that is milder, that's called sunnah, and the other is a very severe form of, it's called
that. So I was wondering, based on the fact that these punishments are probably put in place via Sharia law, are you combating these by speaking to the caliphs because they're the ones who are allowed to amend the law, or are you combating it outside in terms of like, are you trying to do it through the law or through are you trying to combat it through Islam or through the government? Yeah.
Thank you.
we try to rape in Sudan 10 years maybe from the time if its inception. They define, this is the definition, whoever commits the definition much more complicated to make sure that this is to prove sodomy. So the judges were confused for a long time with this definition until they amended it just like 1 year ago. They amended, they say, they made the definition to the international law, like the International Criminal Tribunal or law definition that says whoever commit sexual intercourse, whatever, according to the international definition. They corrected this and of the as it is, and it's also confusing of rape. This is one of the issues. So when we address the issue, we go back and we tell them that Sharia didn't say this. Sharia should be killed in Islam. when a woman, for example, a crime as a of fornication, because she want to be, just go back and get, when you deliver the child, come back again. The woman delivered the child according to the breastfeed the child for 2 years, and then she came back again voluntarily, not by force. She was not coerced to be punished. So they, by people who think they are applying religion.
I'm Terezinha from. I wonder how much this world is so different and how much we have to fight and struggle. I joined you, Leticia, to greet Aisha. You are working in a very, very bad environment to struggle. And I wonder how, in which way the government of Sudan is going to give the report here to the CSW about the situation of women in this aspect. Then second question, comments is about child marriage or early marriage or early pregnancy. It's not much as a poverty, in my opinion. It's because children are seen as object of rights. So the parents, they don't care about the rights of children. They give the child to an old man. We have now in Mozambique as well that we are fighting and struggling, and we have now a strategy, a national strategy approved by the parliament against early marriage with many reasons. Another reason is about the rituals, okay? Rituals of initiation, codes, many early pregnancy, fistula, the sexual violation.
Hi, my name is I'm with the Research USA. Sorry, in Texas, where I'm currently staying, released a study, just gender, which is currently 30 women out of 100,000. Can all four of you talk to what you're doing to raise awareness of issues that pregnant women in general face and how our community, lack of health care, lack of women's knowledge in medicine?
I think also, let's remember that the U.S. is not the lowest in maternal mortality. Other countries are doing much better than we are.
He's an autonomous individual with rights and an agency to say that this is my body and this is how I want this process to go. That's not to say that medical information is not important and medical intervention is not needed, but I think this idea that simply because I don't have a medical degree that I can't tell you what I'm feeling in my own body is preposterous.
Yeah, I just want to pick up on that, and I think just to sort of echo this, it's not only that the U.S. has sort of high rates of maternal mortality, it has increasing rates of maternal mortality. It's one of the few countries in which maternal mortality rates are increasing, and it's largely due to racial disparities in these rates. And so I think the number that I've heard is, the rates of maternal mortality for Black women is 3 to 4 times higher than for white women across the country. So I think that there's, a lot that the reproductive justice lens, has to say about this and how to address it. But I also think that human rights has addressed this issue in a lot of ways and really tried to sort of make maternal mortality into a human rights issue and to frame it in terms of human rights obligations on the part of states, not just a sort of clinical matter or a public health matter, but to talk about these as preventable deaths and that things that states should be doing to address them. And so I think that has really, at the global level, there's guidance from, WHO in terms of approaching maternal mortality as a human rights issue and what kinds of state policies and monitoring needs to be put in place. But also, I think a lot of the tools from the global level, from whether it's UN agencies like WHO or human rights bodies that have really taken on this framework and talked about what states need to be doing to address maternal mortality. Now it's coming to the question of sort of how to operationalize that, working with states to sort of put in place national plans, to put in place laws and policies that prioritize this autonomy and choice and respect in the context of maternal health care. So this is, I think it's very much a global conversation, and the U.S. I think is, an example of where there needs to be more work done around this, especially.
Comments?
Sorry, can I add one last thing? Something I left out is also surrounding, because of all of the stigma and shame that comes just with sex in general in the United States, I think part of the problem as well is that when people feel as though they need to hide a pregnancy, especially young people, because they're shamed for being young parents or shamed for having sex in the first place, I think some of the work that needs to be done is undoing that stigma and unlearning that shame across the board, like in our entire nation, when it comes to sexuality education. There are some people who don't know that they're pregnant in some cases. There are some people who are hiding a pregnancy for fear of retaliation from family members. I think Holly is completely right. We need to remember that things that, like Aisha were talking about, don't just happen far and away. There are people living in this country right now who get pregnant for whatever reason and have to hide their entire pregnancy because they're afraid that someone is going to do violence to them. And so when you have situations like that, I think that of course that's going to contribute to both maternal and infant mortality rates.
Thank you. Yes.
Hello, I'm Josette. I'm currently a student at Brooke College studying public affairs, and I'm looking into probably having a career in women's healthcare or policy, that kind of thing. But my question is, since we're in this environment and because of some of the things that people have touched on, it seems that religion plays such a huge role, not only in this country, but obviously in other places as well. And it seems like in, for example, the Sudan, that religion mixes into the culture, and here we try to have separation of church and state, but then we always have the religion trying to influence the state. So I just am wondering, it seems to me that it is very important to, I want to say, like, fight the Christian right or something. I don't know if that's too strong of a word for some people, but I wonder what some people would say of how to address religion as it affects women and women's healthcare.
I can start there with a personal story. I grew up, I'm a first generation, I grew up in Catholic, very traditional Filipino American family. I was permitted to go to the sex ed in my school, but I mean, from an early age, like the religion really affected. I think I want to, really reinforce what you said. It does really affect the sex ed we got. I mean, we were exposed to things like, this is your virginity is this flower. Did anyone get that in their sex ed? Your virginity is this flower, and every time you have sex, the flower is all gross now. It's like, that's extremely traumatizing, right? And this is directly coming from, a Christian lens on what sex should be, what purity is, and, and so I grew up with this, and this was, one of the reasons why O-School is something that I did is that I grew up, in a house where you couldn't even bring a topic of consent. Consent never came up in my house because why are you even thinking about having sex? That's right. Like, so there are all these things that were. So I think that in terms of how we at O-School are addressing this in ways is there's a section of our product that is all around unlearning shame from whatever religious background that you come with, or spiritual background, or background that brings body shame, religious shame, slut shame, all of these things. These are the barriers that really bring people pain and maybe prevent them from getting care, prevent them from doing the things they want. So personally, yes, we see that in sex ed programs all over the country that are mandated in schools. This breeds a lot of unhealthy attitudes and really dangerous attitudes, because when then a large percentage of the students who get this sex ed decide to have sex, they are not equipped.
Spectrum of reproductive decision making, and we are We have rabbis, we have imams, we have UUs, Presbyterians, very energy line of time.
The laws are. So they think if they get divorced, they cannot marry. Because one of the judges, he marginalized them and told them that you cannot get married except if you finish 10 years. And this is wrong. So we have a lot of problems that sometimes, they take the law in their own hand, the judges, and they discriminate. We have a lot of problems that face women because of misinterpretation.
Further, I want to know where reproductive health intersects in the workplace for you guys. And I also want to know the is changing. I mean,
Not conducive to breast.
Citizenship, things like that all play out because I think that they are connected. Yeah, I'll just stop there.
My name's Mia, I'm from Say, and
We're glad you're here.
thank you. Yesterday I went to, and I know one thing you touched on was sex ed, and I'm just speaking from a youth, I'm a freshman in high school, is that we don't really learn about that. A lot of people don't feel comfortable talking to their parents about that and such. And nowadays, LGBTQ in my school has grown by a lot because nowadays, which is good that people aren't ashamed to be who they are. But one thing is, I know that when we get sex education, even if we do, it's only about straight people. And I know I have a transgender friend that's female to male, and they actually went to an Orlando trip for my band, but I came here instead. And yeah. And so even though he felt more comfortable rooming with the boy, he has to room with the girl. But the thing with that is, he could still get, even though he is attracted to females, so he could still get a transmitted disease from that, even though if you were with the boy, which he wouldn't want to do anything with. And same thing with, like, we talked about at band camp and stuff too. So I just wanted to know if you knew anything that maybe could happen to change that, talking about just more maybe how transmitted disease could happen, because I know just at my school, a lot of the upperclassmen, STD has been spreading around. So now, after they figure that out, they're gonna, like in a month or so, they told us they're gonna have someone come talk to us. But I feel like that should be talked about before it's too late, because now it's too late.
Yes, thank you, great. Awesome, and then we'll do those responses.
Thank you so much for what you have said. I feel included. As you can tell, I'm kind of a fish out of water with a baby. But I do.
We're all swimming with you.
Okay.
Here now, but.
Well, I guess my question was how we could be more inclusive to mothers in all of this, because I mean, in developing nations, 95 almost % of women go through the experience of being a mother, and it changes your life. And I felt like feminism, is all well and good prior to having a baby, and then after, it's like, is there room for me? Do I have a space here anymore? I mean, this is a little girl that I'm raising to be a strong, wonderful woman to contribute, and I feel like this is work, and it needs to, around the world, if we want to elevate the status of women, we have to also elevate the status of mothers, and if mothers could also be included.
If each of you could address is that it's not just women, against men. And we need to begin to think about, not begin, but continue to just victims and perpetrators. We need refugee camps, and we have who are often stigmatized and rejected by their families of origin, half of which are women. So in our final comments, I wonder if we can focus on creating different kinds of cultural norms where we can all be part of the solution, not just part of the problem, and maybe some concrete measures around those areas. And we owe you an opportunity to ask a question, and then we'll close.
Thank you very much. I am from Tunisia, belong to different organizations, women's organizations, Amnesty International. I was in the founding member of the coalition against the death penalty. And I have a terrible event happened in my life. My youngest son and his wife were killed in Istanbul on New Year's Eve. So this is my, I missed the temptations, but you are dealing with religion, and we see how religion, all religions use women to keep them in a subservient status. India is one of the countries that is hated the most by Islam. And this is much with the way we grew up, where Virginia is even that men, their wives and daughters there. And they had their wife go and participate in that. So my question,
Yes, ask your question.
my question is, are you thinking about those women in North Africa and in the Middle East who are fighting for the separation of religion and politics? This is what we have been fighting for, and it would be great if you could give your voice in our battle. Thank you.
Thank you. Why don't we start down there and in a final summary?
That's what we're trying in Sudan. When we speak, we have to separate religion from laws that need to be complied with international instruments. That's what we're trying to do in Sudan. And that was my advocacy when I was in the UN and when I joined the AGAD organization. So that's what we are trying to do. But we face a lot of problems, from Islamists who refuse to even sign or ratify CSW. I am one of the advocates of CSW. For a long time, I even met with the president, but they didn't allow us, of course, because they have a very strong lobby against CSW or the Convention on. We're trying to separate religion from laws, because we say you want to go to heaven, go and